Okay, so you have the Sandman right there, and then you have me, Dr. Rhino, and you have the Sandman behind me because this is the quality, the professional quality. You get twice the guest for one of the host. Hello, everyone. Bickman, good gracious. I'm so excited today, everybody. I'd say I couldn't sleep, but I couldn't. So, wasting. Oh, well. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the one and only, the Sandman. If you would like an the man does a lot, but if you want a link to every single one of the things that I could think of that he does, !Sandman in the chat. This is something everyone can do. You don't got to be a mod or anything. This will get you a link to his Instagram, to his YouTube channel with very, very helpful YouTube videos, as well as a link to the Conclave podcast, his excellent 40K podcast.
Yeah. Well, we do our best, but excellent. Let's not push it.
I think it's fantastic. You guys have really, Quipster, the rest of the gang, it's all been very helpful for me as a relatively new person to 40K. I dove really heavily into the painting side of things. And unfortunately, due to COVID and just my own time, I have not been able to play as many games as I would want to. Hopefully, I'm going to fix that this year, but we will see.
Yeah, I think everyone's in the same kind of boat. Really, I think a lot of people haven't played that much. It's kind of the funny thing about like the meta, as it were, is a lot of people get quite unhappy about things, but very few of us have actually been able to play regularly. It's kind of weird.
So I know you guys like to do this on the Conclave podcast, and I'm going to just straight up steal it.
Nice.
What have you been doing hobby-wise?
Yeah, well, so on the painting desk, it's kind of two things at the moment. So the first thing is we kind of have a club in a place called Bermondsey in London where all the guys in Conclave are members. And, a bunch of other people, and we have like an inside like painting tournament, which is quite fun. And my model that I'm using for this painting tournament is actually my Secret Santa model, so I can't show it to you in case he watches this. However, that is one thing I'm working on. The other thing I'm working on, as I'm sure we will discuss today, is 6 wolf quads.
Ooh.
Because that's something that probably get to, but I'm going to want to have a play around with, I reckon.
Excellent. Yeah, and I can only assume that's because of, and again, we will dive into it further, but I can only assume that's because of the changes to the mining laser. Perhaps, or is that just the handheld one?
So that's something that's quite funny. So the mining laser didn't actually change. The mining, so that was a Warcom mistake, I think, because they said, "Oh, the new mining laser profile is this," but it was actually the same profile. So I think in the 8th edition book there was actually a misprint, and they put mining laser at D3 damage, which then got FAQ'd because it was supposed to be D6. So maybe that was why there was some confusion there. But the mining laser is actually the same as it was in 8th, which is quite nice.
Nuts. Because I think that must have been what I was running off of, because whatever I had seen, again, very limited experience with Genestealers, I must have seen an old version, because I'm like, D3 damage, this is kind of garbage. Why would anybody run this? But so you've been working on some wolf quads. What is the color scheme for your Genestealer Cult army for the folks who haven't seen it?
So there's some pics on my Instagram. So my Genestealer Cult army is agri-world based, which I thought was something that'd be quite fun to do. So all of the bases are like like plowed fields, just using like textured paint and trying to get some cool effects there, which has been a lot of fun. I think it looks pretty cool. And then so because they're all farmers, I actually chose like Achilles green as the base, and that's a color that it's one of those colors that's called green, but it's actually kind of a blue. So it looks like jeans. So that's the idea, is that they're all kind of wearing jeans, and then a snakebite leather is like my favorite color, and I hadn't used it like properly in an army yet. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to use snakebite leather as the other part of it, and then the actual carapace for the Genestealers is green as like turquoise and gray. I really like the Pauper Prince's scheme, but I didn't want to be tied into Pauper Prince's, so I did like a slight twist on it. That was really fun. There's a lot of conversions in my army because it's all like agri-world based, so I've got loads of like hay bales in the army. I found this awesome tutorial online where it shows you how to make hay bales for like railroads and stuff. It's awesome. And I was like, well, I'm totally doing that. So I made all these little hay bales, and I use them to like know which what the Ridge Runner squads are. All of my aberrants have got scythes instead of having the traditional heavy mining weapons, which I was so grateful in this book, because of course they've all got the same weapon,
Mm-hmm.
and I was so worried that like they were gonna, it looks more like a pick than a hammer, and I was worried that they're gonna be like, oh, you've got to have the hammer now, but actually, maybe
It's
jumping a bit
all
ahead here, but there's no distinction now.
Mm-hmm.
This is a big change in the kind of the ethos of how they've gone about this codex. Is they've gone, there's actually no change in these weapons. They're the same. Because before, because if you look at the models, some have picks, some have hammers. Now they're just like, oh no, these are all the same thing. So yeah, I was really happy about that.
Same.
So yeah,
I was really excited because I honestly really liked the hammers, and I was like okay with the picks, and you only get so many hammers in the kit, and now they're like, oh, it's all the same thing. I'm like, oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's a decent amount of attacks really and damage. I think on the aberrants. I think especially coming out alongside Custodes was a really interesting comparison, because of course I haven't done a deep dive into the Custodes Codex, but the Terminators and stuff not getting 3 damage was a bit of a shock.
Yes.
So I was surprised. Like, it's not that I don't think aberrants should be 3 damage. I think they should be, but the Custodes don't seem to hit as hard as I thought they would. I don't know what the points are like and stuff on them, so maybe that's how they account for it. But yeah, I was awesome. Actually.
Yeah, I was. That seemed to be the consensus. Like I told you before, I was actively avoiding spoilers because it seems like a lot of GSC stuff was getting revealed early.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I'm not going to look at it. I'm not going to look at it. And
I feel like half the Tau and Eldar stuff is out at this point.
that too.
Like it's just everywhere.
But yeah, the thing with the Custodes, the fact that they didn't get on the axes specifically, spears 2 damage fine, but the fact that the axes weren't flat 3 really hurt my soul.
Even Trajan, like I just read Regent Shadow. That's the other thing I've done recently. I read the Regent Shadows 2 books, and then I read Conrad Kurz. Excellent, loved that book, fantastic. But anyway, in that book they talk about Trajan Valoris, of course, and in that they're like, he is, it is Guilliman, it is Trajan Valoris, and then you've got chapter masters and other heroes of the Imperium somewhere below that. And then like, I know he was D3 damage before, which was terrible, but even like I would have given him like flat 5. I would have gone way overboard. I don't know. Maybe that is overboard. I don't know. But I think because they gave him 3 damage, they then had to bring everything else down. If you know what I mean, to make him seem better. And so actually, they should have just made him better, I think.
Or you keep flat 3 and just give him a ton of attacks.
Yeah, that's another good one. Yeah,
just like I want a 7 attack Trajan, 8 attacks on the charge, like some sort of insane wombo combo to make him just blender an entire 5-man unit of Gravis Marines, just gone. And that would be tasty. But it's as far as Custodes are going, that's actually what I've been working on. Yesterday on stream, I was building 5 more Venatari and another 3 spear guard. I do a thing with my Custodes where I want them to be true scale compared to regular Marines, so I cut them at the, you can kind of see it. You know what, I have a view for this. Come on, let's see if I this uses all my old graphics and whatnot because I haven't changed it, but you can kind of see it here where
this is so high tech compared to the Conclave. Wow, that's so cool.
So I cut them at the thigh and then pin them and then fill the gaps with milliput so that their legs always seemed a little too stubby to me. So stretching out the thigh so that it's a bit more proportional in my eyes. So I did that, but the big thing I was working on was this guy. I was making my own blade wizard. So this...
Whoa. Yeah.
He's going to be like at this kind of an angle, like leaping off a piece of terrain. Hopefully make it really dynamic.
Fire, mate. Those are so good.
Thank you. Green stuff cloaks. I've learned a lot from a friend of mine named the Sauce Painting, and the biggest tip I can give for working with green stuff. Step one: once you've mixed it, leave it the hell alone. Don't touch it for like 30 minutes minimum, and then roll it out. And I could go into it in more detail. But long story short, like lots of random bits of Venatari head, shoulder pads from La Bear Demonica, because I love their bits. And I had these swords laying around from a different project that I didn't end up using them for. And I'm just like, I think these are perfect. Like, these are very much like Blade Champion, especially with the aesthetic of my Custodes, which when they're fully painted, they look like this.
Okay, very dark. Like it. Yeah.
And actually, I mean, we're talking about Genestealer Cult, so I may as well, like, give me 2 seconds. Let me grab you one of my Genestealer Cult cowboys here.
Yeah, I'll grab an Atalan Jackal, put it on screen so people can see my scheme, maybe.
Okay.
So I don't know
with my Genestealers, they are intended to be a facsimile of Dune, the folks from Dune, the Fremen. So I gave them the blue coloring and and sandy bases.
Yeah.
So this is my
awesome.
This is my Primus. Oh, what's up, Quipster? Not sure if his mic is on. Should be. Yeah, your audio's coming in for me.
Okay. I guess if other people in chat can confirm if they're hearing.
Yeah, actually, this probably would have been important. Chat, can you hear the Sandman? And now we wait. We wait for the chat to read in. But I also made a Keller morph. Okay, they can hear you. So I made a Keller morph out of Niem Shai Marad. So
awesome! Yeah.
Gave her a third arm sticking out of her back.
Oh my god, that's really cool. Damn, yeah.
So this was a really fun scheme to do, but now we're back to Custodes. That's I was just like, I need to make I didn't want to buy the Shadow Throne box because really I'm not going to buy a whole box just for 2 models. And
yeah, same. Yeah, I love the model so much, the Saboteur, but I just can't justify it.
Especially because, like, for somebody who's already an established Genestealer Cult player, that box was just like, guys, like, I understand why you would put the Brood Coven crew in there, but
yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I do really want more people to play the faction because that's the only way we get more models, right? So I'm happy to have a box dedicated to, for new players. But yeah, personally, I just couldn't especially because the Genestealer Cult rule, familiar with them, actually say you can only take 1 of each character. So you can't even run. It's not like another book where you could be like, well, I guess I could have another librarian potentially in the future. There's just none of that. So yeah, it's really just no chance.
Yeah. So that's the hobbying. Now, everyone has been asking like lots of questions here in chat. The biggest of which I think I would love before we really deep dive into some of the information that we've seen from the releases, as well as any sort of personal insights you have being an experienced Genestealer Cult player to my newly minted Genestealer Cult Cowboy status. Which, by the way, actually, before I forget, a friend of mine who actually sponsors the channel, he has a paint brand called Cuttlefish Colors. One of the colors is called Poor Boy Denim, which I did use as my highlight color. So I did paint my Genestealers with denim.
You know what? I just I've been weathering them, and I need a highlight color. So I'll check that out.
Oh, dude, I'll send it to you. Yeah, we'll talk after this. I'll send you some paint. I get free paint, so I'll send you some paint. But as far as weathering, like this stuff right here, these Vallejo pigment powders, that's how I got this sand effect. So it was the rust paint or the rust pigments. That was easy town, just like smashing at it with a makeup brush. But
yeah, no, I used that on my towel actually.
Oh, perfect. So do you think Genestealer Cult are going to be competitive in ninth edition now?
So I definitely do think they're going to be competitive. I think that at this point in time, nobody has said anything, and I've not noticed anything that I look at and go, that's oppressively good, which traditionally comes with a very competitive codex, right? That there's some mechanic or some output or some resilience that is so over the top, they're either going to wipe you off the board turn one, or you just cannot do any damage, etc., etc. So yeah, I think that they are going to be. I think they're going to be well received in that respect, because I think that they are going to be very good, but I don't think they're going to be too much. Is my prediction. LVO is in 2 weeks, so this is something that is. I don't know if it's controversial in the American scene. I don't know how people feel about it, but the fact that this book has come out so close to LVO, I believe they have confirmed it will be legal. So, like, that's a really interesting idea. But yeah, I guess we'll see what people do for LVO.
Yeah, that is a really good point as far as like tournaments and related to the Codex releases. But because LVO, things like the tournaments at Adepticon, or I know there's one out on the East Coast. Anyway, the point being that these tournaments are not run by GW, so GW is not under any requirement to like time these things appropriately for them. I'm sure it was a consideration, at least in a minor part, but 2 weeks I feel is pretty reasonable, especially because while not a competitive tournament player, I've seen and anecdotally have heard from a lot of people who are, that they rapidly iterate their games on Tabletop Simulator these days. So practicing with or against Genestealer cults over the course of 2 weeks probably is not that big of an ask. Now, will some complain? Probably. But if you're saying that it's, because let's be honest, as far as the competitive meta goes, Genestealer Cult were not the most well represented army. So
For sure.
So maybe we'll see more Genestealer Cult players to begin with, which is great. But do you think we're not going to S tier? We're not pulling like an AdMech or a Drukari where people look at the Codex in the first 5 minutes and go, waiter. There's some brokenness in this Codex, or is there, or are we going to like a Sisters of Battle, like a nice high mid tier to upper tier if played well army?
Yeah. I would guess. So I would totally say Sisters of Battle is probably a good, a good level, and it's a level that I think is pretty nice to be at. If they are S tier, I think that it come. A lot of it might come from Chapter through 2022, because one of the things that this new rules pack seems to be doing, if you haven't seen it, you can find it on the Warhammer community website, and a bunch of people have covered it. Then the secondaries seem to be much harder to score, by and large, because the easiest ones got harder to score, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are very few units in the game that can still score things like what the equivalent of Rod is, teleport homers, all of these action secondaries very well. You stack that with the fact that 2 of the Genestealer Cult secondaries are pretty good. They're not the best in the game. They definitely have some. They're definitely amazing in some matchups. But so when you stack that, I think there's potential, because I think it could be the case that Genestealer Cults, it could be the case they just score so well, and the top players just have a really easy time with them, because every single time they play Warhammer 40k, they know they're getting 45 points on the secondary, and then they're just playing the primary, and that's a great place to start. So I don't know if that is going to be the case, but if they do go to S tier, that would be why I would suspect. But again, like, the nice thing about it is the damage output isn't crazy. I think you're still very often get tabled playing Genestealer Cults, which is not something I might actually really like that about the faction. So yeah, I think they're in a pretty good spot.
Okay, excellent.
It's early days. Yeah.
That makes me really excited. So what, for a very new player, like, my army is like, it was a very random assortment that I got from as a very generous like trade very heavily in my favor with a friend. It's like roughly 20 Brood Brothers, 4 heavy weapons teams, a Lehman Russ, Armored Sentinel, and then like one Ridge Runner. I bought a Goliath truck that I've dry fit so I can make it, and magnetize so I can make it a grinder or a regular truck, but I think I'm definitely going rock grinder just because it looks cool. 12 bikes, 3 or 4 quads, 3 quads. It's three. It would be 3 quads. 3 quads. Then roundabouts, 20 neophytes, 5 acolytes. I need more acolytes. I think that's a given that I need to get more acolytes. But several characters, Ridge Runner. The long story short, sorry, I'm starting to just list things as opposed to having a point. The the models, the units that you think are going to best be able to take advantage of this new Crossfire mechanic.
Okay, Crossfire, yeah.
Because I understand that it's pretty simple. Get a unit on either side of an enemy unit, and within a certain distance, and when they shoot, they get +1 to hit, and if they're within 12 inches of the model that or the enemy unit that they're shooting at, then the enemy unit doesn't get cover, and you're also getting +1 to wound, if I'm remembering correctly.
So so if you've got the Crossfire ability, I guess the best way to look at it is kind of Crossfire is Tracer Fire, and then Exposed is like a maneuverability kind of thing. So if you have got the Crossfire keyword, which like most of the shooting units in the Codex have, if you hit them either with 5 small weapons, so like 5 1 damage weapons,
right, that
or
was
1 higher damage weapon, then a Crossfire token goes on that unit, and everything else in your army that shoots at that unit is going to get +1 to hit. Now, there are also multiple ways in the book to also add Crossfire tokens. I think the Nexus is going to be a pretty popular choice this edition. So, like, and he can just apply a Crossfire marker each turn. So most of your army is getting +1 to hit. It's kind of like getting an extra ballistic skill. Again, this book is brand new. I haven't played with it, but just from reading it and just I spoke to quite a few players at this point. And yeah, I think that's basically how it's going to play out. We're basically a BS3 army at this point, which is great.
Yeah,
it's so good. So and then Exposed, sorry, is a maneuverability thing. So that's a pincer maneuver type thing. You still have to have the Crossfire marker to benefit from this. But if you there's a good diagram in the book that you can use. But basically, if you're shooting through a unit and your unit is behind it, so pincer maneuver, then you're also going to get +1 to wound and ignore cover. And actually, that's really good. +1 to wound is of course amazing. Actually, ignore cover. Like a lot of things in the game get cover naturally just by without doing anything. There's cover all over the place nowadays. Ignoring cover isn't too far from an extra AP in 9th edition, so it's a really great mechanic. It's really powerful. So in terms of what utilizes it best, as you asked, I think there's many ways you can go. So in terms of your key shooting units, I won't talk about characters, but of course the ones that have Crossfire will benefit from it. But I think that your neophytes and your Ridge Runners are generally the 2 key shooting units. But then you've also got Rock Grinders and Athlant Jackals that also provide a bit of firepower. And I think because Rock Grinders and Athlant Jackals are so good just innately, I suspect they'll be the more popular choices. And because of that fact, that actually might be the source of a lot of Genestealer Cult firepower. But I think Ridge Runners are amazing. I've loved them. In the UK tournaments, they've kind of stepped up the amount of terrain that we use. And so that's one of the only reasons I might not use Ridge Runners as much. But neophytes again, there's a bit of confusion at the moment. There's a mistake in the book, it seems, where the unit says you can take 20. The cut back at the book says you can only take 15. And that's a big deal because if you had 20, you would unlock 2 extra heavy weapons. And so if that's the case, and if you can take them in blobs of 20, I think it's not my play style, but I think it would be very good to just take loads and loads of neophytes, lots of mining lasers. You're resurrecting 6 for each squad each turn with the cult banners. So Yeah, I think they're really good. I think if you take a mechanized list as well, I think that's also very good. It's a bit terrain dependent, but if you did take a load of Ridge Runners, a load of Rock Grinders, some, a load of stuff in trucks even, that's a solid army. That's a really solid army, I think. So, yeah, I think the balance of the book is pretty good. Like, genuinely, I think all of the shooting units will do you well. Yeah.
So you mentioned the banners. Should people start building as many like have 5 banners in your army just to make sure that every squad of neophytes has one?
So the cult icons themselves are 20 points, I believe. I think that's the same across both. I can check actually. But so I would probably not lean into them much for the acolytes, because 20 points is 2 acolytes, and that is that isn't what you get back on average in 1 turn. And I highly doubt that you're ever going to be resurrecting acolytes 2 turns, because of course, generally speaking, the way Genestealer cults work is, you throw them up and they die. Call it trading, and so I just don't think you're going to get that use. However, because of the acolyte icon ward's ability to use it on things like bikes, I think the icon ward coupled with bikes, and at that point it's just a bonus for your acolytes and your neophytes. I think that's really good. But yeah, I guess the other style of play is, if you're a massive horde fan and you just want to take loads and loads of neophytes, if that's what you want to do, yeah, at that point I think taking the banner on the neophytes and taking the acolyte icon ward, so you're resurrecting 6 a turn, like, that's got to be pretty good. So I think that's probably the only instance I would say to build all of your banners, is if you see yourself spamming loads and loads of neophytes.
Gotcha. Okay. Because like my mind went to, and actually just as an anecdotal question, because again, very new to all this, do you think shotguns or auto guns are going to be the choice, or is there a world where both of them have a use, like auto guns in the back, shotguns in the front, business up front, party in the rear, sort of a thing?
I think shotguns in the front, auto guns in the back is fine. I guess it depends a bit on what you're using your neophytes for. So if you're just using them for holding backfield objectives, then go auto guns, because take that little bit of extra range. But yeah, to be honest, they come out. It comes out in the wash. They're both about equal, really.
Okay.
Yeah, and because the seismic cannon as well got a longer range.
Yeah.
Even that, you don't really want it properly up close. So 24. Although you can get, like, the idea that I'm going to put shotguns on my neophytes to get them closer, but then put my heavy weapons in threat range of my opponent being able to kill them. So I don't really want to do that. So I suspect I'm going to keep the auto guns, but I do think shotguns are fine. Ultimately, it's just they do no damage. Maybe depending on the meta, they might be better, but generally speaking, they don't really deliver.
And well, I mean, hopefully that it won't make them, Custodes deleters. Like, you're not going to get a unit of 10 neophytes deleting a unit of 3 custodian guard, but getting +1 to hit and +1 to wound and no cover, like, makes them, like, if all those things line up, which, yeah, won't happen every time, but if those things line up, you can take a unit that most people probably wouldn't take very seriously and be like, oh, that just deleted half of my unit. Oh, I might have to actually deal with these guys now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And resurrecting models onto points,
and that,
like the Necrons do, that's a really powerful ability. So people might use that to really devastating effect. I guess we'll see. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned Necrons, because between the ability for Genestealer cults to, for the most part, for the cost of a 20-point unit, it seems, be able to bring dudes back, and then the Custodes having these katas that are like command protocols, they're literally taking, like, they're like, hey, Necrons, I see you have this ability. We're going to make it better and give it to somebody else. Like, it's gotta feel a little bit bad as a Necron player.
Yeah, they're definitely suffering from the early Codex syndrome. Space Marines are always going to be pretty simplistic. However, if you're a Space Marine player, I mean, let's face it, you're probably going to get new supplements this year. So, like, yeah, they've got that to look forward to. Necrons, I hope they get some more love. I just really do. I mean, they're the bad guy of ninth edition, so
Yeah.
they deserve more.
Do you think? Okay, so it was a random thought. Like, what do you think is your favorite unit going into ninth edition, and did it change from before the codex, like, kind of came into your, like, the new codex came into your view and you got to start looking at it?
So my favorite, I think my favorite unit in the Genestealer Cult range might actually be the Rock Grinder, just because I've always thought it was absolutely mad. Like every time it's on the battlefield, cinematically, it's hilarious. The first thing about the Rock Grinder you need to remember is that it does still get blips. So that Rock Grinder, if you're playing against Space Marines or Custodes, right? Let's say you're playing against Custodes, those Custodes rock up, and then they look up, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a Rock Grinder appears. They're like, "Oh my god, where did that come from?" At that point, the guys in the back are like, "Oh, this is gonna be a tricky one against the best of the Imperium." But the guy in the front is just crazy, so he just puts the pedal down. The Rock Grinder just goes full speed ahead, and like there's this guy up top just firing mining lasers off, just haphazardly, missing everything, doing no damage, but doing his best. There's another guy with a heavy stubber, which is just, there's no point bringing that versus Custodes, but he brought it anyway. When it gets close enough, there's a guy in the back with a bag of dynamite who will literally throw this bag of dynamite at a custodian, this gene-wrought masterpiece of bioengineering, and the Custodes just like looks at it, and then the bag blows up and kills him. It's absolutely hilarious. At which point the Rock Grinder hits like a wall of custodians, and I imagine there's like that. I imagine there's like that sound where it goes like boom, as it just chews through that first custodian, and it's like he's been killed by a Rock Grinder. Like in my army, I imagine they're like combine harvesters. At which point, of course, the custodians just surround this Rock Grinder and just pummel it to pieces, as you can imagine. And the guy in the back was like, guys in the back, like, maybe this was a bad idea. And the guy in the front goes, no, it's all right, guys. I've got this. He presses a button, and the Rock Grinder blows up because there is an auto blow up stratagem. And like that's the life of a Rock Grinder on the battlefield. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. At which point the guys in the back survive. They somehow like stand up and they're like, well, that was crazy.
Quipster is saying, fuck your Rock Grinders, man.
Yeah, I know. I said to Quipster once, like, I have like I'm just going to try really hard to just to kill like Trajan Valorous with a Rock Grinder. Like, imagine if that was how he died in the books.
Just like Hero of the Imperium.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then there's the noise of like somebody putting like meat in a food processor and just turning it on, exactly. Just kind of gets chunked up with Trajan pieces.
Yeah, so I think it's absolutely brilliant. And sorry, yes, I got a bit distracted there with the story.
Oh, but, no. Those are the kinds of stories that I live for. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's the narrative I love about 40K.
Yeah, and the thing is about that is that happens every game. That's how I always play them. So like they're just absolutely brilliant. And then of course, yes, they are absolutely awesome in 9th edition. So I think the important thing about the Rock Grinder is that it got -1 damage. That's probably the biggest change it got. It also improved its save though. So
really,
that means that so that means the Rock Grinder is now toughness 7 with a 3-up save and is -1 damage. And I said this in a video I did the other day, where like that means that profile is the same as the Dreadnought, if that sounds familiar. And we all know how good Dreadnoughts can be. It is 110 points, 115 with the demo, I believe. And it's got really great combat. It now hits on 3s in combat, which is awesome. And as I said, because of Crossfire, it's basically hitting on 3s when shooting as well. So it's actually very similar to a Dreadnought, of course, also with access +1 to wound. And the seismic cannon is a really great profile, so that's awesome. And so I think they're a bit of a bargain, really. They've also got transport capacity.
That was what I was just about to say. It's a dreadnought. Yeah. It's a dreadnought that can carry dudes.
Yeah. So I think for 110 points, I think they're really good. So yeah, I really want to run 3 of them. I guess we'll see. Of course, trucks are also great, but like the Rock Grinders are so fun. transports with combat are just sensational. So
I think I need to get more rock grinders. I only have one.
Yeah.
I think I need more.
Yeah.
I think I need more.
Yeah. So
Which
I want to play around with them.
Yeah, I see. Like again, like now you put like these very like vivid, hilarious images of like rock grinder goes like skating past like a unit of custodian guard that are just like, what the hell? And then there's just like this burlap sack gets tossed at them that beeps, and then boom.
So, I like to imagine they catch it as well. They're like, the hell is this? And then it blows.
Do you think the Genestealers would write something cheeky on it, like, you know, like Easter eggs? Or Happy Sanguinalia? Boom.
For Emperor.
Oh, boy. Yeah. So, with the fact that rock grinders are getting all of these, like, really cool things, making them essentially dreadnoughts with transport capacity, which I think is a great, like, for someone like me who, like, I think most of us, I started with, when I started in the hobby back in August of last year, I bought the Indomitus box. So Space Marines were the very first thing I'd ever painted. They were the first thing I learned how to play. I painted Necrons, never played it once, and then traded the army for Custodes. And I think that was the best trade I ever made. But the big takeaway is that some like metaphors like that, like, or analogies like that really help someone like me be able to look at a rock grinder and be like, oh, I see how I can utilize this now, because it's a vehicle that carries things. Great. So it's more protection for my neophytes or my acolytes or whatever I put in there. And then on top of that, it's something that I can use as a melee threat and that still has a shooting threat. Like the I know I said it to you in a message because it had been a random thought. The Primus, this guy chat, the Primus now has an ability to like point at guys and make them better at shooting, like give them +1 to hit. But that was the same release.
Once the wound and an aura of reroll once to hit.
That's it. Sorry, my mistake. The but in that same release, were they not talking about the fact that you can give him a warlord trait to make it not just core units but cult units, so he can point at a rock grinder and say +1 to hit or +1 to wound? Can he do that from inside the rock grinder?
So you can't do it from inside the rock grinder. That's actually a really interesting point. So I believe it's actually an upgrade you pay for with points. Which is cool because you get that and the warlord trait if you'd like.
Ooh.
So I believe I will check now, but I believe it's the case that you can use his ability to allow a unit to reroll 1s to wound on 2 units, and yes, there is no longer a restriction to core. So yeah, you could put it on 2 rock grinders. You could put it on 6 ridge runners, reroll 1s to wound. That's really good. Of course it is. So yeah, I think that's a really great choice. So you can't use command abilities if you're in a transport. However, there is a rule in the codex, and this is very unique to GSE, potentially very powerful, which is that you can use those abilities, we call them command abilities because you use them in the command phase, after you deep strike, which is normally, it's a big thing because normally that's a huge weakness of units that are deep striking, because of course you then you can't use your there's a strategy for chaplains, but as an example, you can't use your chaplain buffs on sanguinary guard that come in from deep strike with you, because they can no longer he can no longer select them because the command phase has passed.
Yeah, because you come in.
Do that. Yeah.
You come in at the end of the movement phase for deep strike, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, I'm sorry I interrupted you, because this is still stuff that I'm like learning, because there's the command phase and then of course movement phase, and deep strike happens at the end of the movement, so you can't do your command phase stuff when they're floating up in the sky. And
exactly, yeah, that's exactly it. And same with the transport. So technically, the way it's worded in the rule book is when your stuff is in a transport, it's technically off the board. So that there are things like the open tops rule, things like trucks. But for characters, you're technically not on the board to have that ability. So is the way it's looked at.
Okay. And Burkness, hello. They're saying sup, Sandman. Then there's a lot of talk about Brood Brothers in the chat. Brood Brothers.
Yeah, so this is to be honest, I think what Games Workshop have done is just a simplification of the Brood Brothers rule, and that is a good thing generally. However, the not issue, but I guess the slight controversy around it is because to a lot of Genestealer Cult players, Brood Brothers are incredibly important to their narrative and to their fluff, and they love doing those conversions, Imperial Guard units to Genestealer Cult units, making things look like they've been taken over by Tyranids. So the idea that Games Workshop have now come in and said, okay, so we're going to make it nice and straightforward. All you can do as Genestealer Cult is just take an allied detachment of Imperial Guard, and you can only take up to 500 points. So that is immediately, that means before you could take a Lehman Russ or a heavy weapons team in a Genestealer Cult detachment. There were specific units you could do that with, and now that's gone. You can't do that, and even though you can still take the allied detachment, you can also take less Brood Brothers. Now, competitively, I will say this is now a massive deal. There haven't been many armies in the game that have been heavily reliant on those guard units because, well, quite frankly, the thing that is, I don't think he really minds, is true about Brood Brothers is they are essentially just worse guards because you don't get access to like a good regiment, as it were. You basically get +2 leadership and you can use Unquestioning Loyalty. So it's not a massive deal competitively. However, for a lot of players' narrative, this is a bit of a blow because lots of players love the Brood Brothers. They want that fallen guard regiment, and now they feel like they've lost that. I think is basically the gist.
Gotcha. Okay, because I know I had sent the quick list to you. It seems that everything I have that is guard, like between my Brood Brothers, my weapons teams, everything is on the nose. Minus a pintle, because I couldn't take a pintle mounted like Stormbolter or something on my tank. It was exactly 500 points. So like I was like, oh sweet, like this works out for me. But I could see how, like you said, like narratively speaking, someone could have made their entire army Brood Brothers and tons of tanks and done all sorts of graffiti work on them, and now it's just like, well, I guess I have to play guard now.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're exactly right. Yeah, if you want to do that, you have to play guard. I mean, if it's for your narrative purposes, and Games Workshop do say this, do feel free to ignore the rules if you're playing a fun game with friends. Like, I really don't think anybody's going to mind that you want to play with a Brood Brothers Baneblade, for example, because it's just a fun thing. Yeah, I love my Brood Brothers as well, but I love the Genestealer Cult Sculpt so much. I normally prefer to play with them. I'll be honest, so it's not a massive thing for me, but I totally respect that for a lot of players, it's very important to their narrative and their army.
So you actually hit my next, kind of preemptively answered my next question. I love the entire line of sculpts for the Genestealers.
So good.
They are, I would put them up there as some of the best sculpts for 40k period.
100%.
What is your favorite Genestealer Cult sculpt?
Ooh. There's a lot of really
pick your
ones.
Favorite child right now.
Yeah. I mean the model that I like, I'll give this example. I won't use any of my conversions, but like the model that I pick up the most and just look at, it's actually the familiar for the Biophagus. The Biophagus as well.
With the big flask.
Yeah, it's so cute. It's so brilliant. You just love those things. But 100%, like, so when you start Genestealer Cults, and this is a good tip for anybody's watching and they want to get into the faction, but you look at those price ranges and it's quite an expensive army. We spoke about collecting lots of acolytes earlier, and it's like, well, like acolytes are quite expensive to collect, so having to pay a bunch of money for characters as well is a lot of money. So what I did, and what a lot of people do at the start, is you can convert up a lot of the characters, because a lot of them, there's nothing particularly unique about them. They have like a special stick, or they have like a special weapon, or whatever it's going to be, and so you can absolutely convert them. However, and this is the thing, I converted up like the whole range, and I have the whole character range like twice. I have a conversion, I have a normal, because this is the thing, all of the character sculpts were so good, I still just had to buy them over time, and so I still got them all anyway, eventually. So now I do just have like the entire range twice, and it is one thing that's not necessarily like, it's very early days, so I don't want to make any big judgments, but I was hoping there would be more character support, not in terms of like, I know you can take an extra character per HQ. However, in terms of helping you play the mission, in terms of helping you get points on the board, and in terms of the weaknesses of playing with a high character count army, that has really been addressed in the book. And so, for example, what I'm essentially getting at is, I love the characters so much. I want it to be the competitive thing to do, or the natural thing to do, to run like 8 characters. And I think if you speak to Games Workshop, that's kind of what they're getting at. There are so many characters. We're talking like a dozen plus characters at this point, and they want you to take as many as you can in the army. But there's not. It still doesn't really quite work for me. It's better, but yeah, I wish that was something that we got more of. So, for example, accounting for things like assassinate, and accounting for things like, I know for things like the Sanctus and the Saboteur, you can't shoot them unless they're the closest unit if they're over 12 inches away. But more of those type of rules would have really helped, in my opinion. So I guess we'll see.
So kind of like a Genestealer Cult branded version of like something between Lookout Sir and Bodyguard.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we've got Unquestioning Loyalty. The problem with Unquestioning Loyalty, it's basically the same as it was in 8th edition. If you're not familiar, the way it works is when you take damage on a character, if somebody attacks your character, you can try and pass on that damage, kind of similar to drones. And it's actually on a 4-up, but it's on a 3-up now. If it's on the Patriarch, which is quite nice. However, the problem with that is because, of course, minions, as they are very easy to kill. So it's not much trouble for your opponent to just go, okay, well, I'll kill the neophytes first, and then I'll kill your character. So there's not really it doesn't actually come up as much as you'd think. Maybe it was more now. I don't know. I doubt it. But it's more of a gotcha, really, and questioning loyalty. In my experience, it's if your opponent is entirely unfamiliar with Genestealer cults and they just put everything into the Patriarch. At that point, yes, that's a big deal. You can pass it off. But if your opponent knows Genestealer cults well, then yeah, it should really come up. The thing.
Gotcha. So I would have to say that, at least as far as my favorite sculpt, it's got to be somewhere between the Kellermorph, Billy the Nid, and probably, honestly, like, I know apparently this is a very divisive topic between myself and a friend of mine, Matt Yee. He loves the male sculpt of the Magus, and I love the female sculpt of the Magus.
Yeah.
Especially if you use the alternate, because she has in a lot of the art, she's holding a dagger in her offhand, and there's one where she's holding like a bound up skull or like a head or something, and I'm like, that's the head or that's the arm every time. But I love that sculpt. A lot of power in that pose.
Yeah, I think you've got to be right. I mean, I think to your point there, you see so many conversions based off of that model.
Yes.
Things like Archons, things like Corsairs. There's so many players who see that model and go, that's awesome, I want that in my army. So yeah, I'm going to give it to you, I think. But I mean, the male one I like, but yeah, I think I'll go to her. She's called Marge in my army, so I'm going to give it to Marge.
So actually, but I didn't even think about it from the perspective of like the conversion potential of the model. That model in particular, you are correct. There's a lot you can do with that one. Like Primaris Psyker, bam! Like you have a Psyker, like that could easily be turned into a really cool Inquisitor type character.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's one of the other things I really like about Genestealers. For the most part, especially the characters, you can, with minimal conversion, use for, I would think, other projects, other armies. But I that's like a lot of the ways I look at things is I love to convert. I love to kit bash. Like this Niem Shai Marad, I used the same model 3 different ways. because I bought it 3 times because I loved the sculpt so much. Standard, like box art color scheme, once as a Keller morph, and then again as a Canoness with relic pistol.
Oh, cool.
That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. I definitely, it's a shame that like it's a Blackstone Fortress sculpt that's really hard to get your hands on, but I spent way too much money, so I had to use them. I had to use them. So what are some tips? What are some things that people should be aware of, should be excited for with regards to the Genestealer Cult army in 9th edition now with this new codex?
So I think, the rock grinders are a big one. The trucks as well are amazing. Trucks and rock grinders are definitely something I think you would be a worthwhile investment for 2 reasons. A, we spoke about how the rock grinders are good, but also, as you actually alluded to, it's actually, even without the magnetization, it's very easy to switch between the two. And so you actually get quite a lot of use out of those models if you need to the range. And the trucks are quite important, or at least you need something in your army to provide for the things you're not putting in Deep Strike. You can still only put half your army into reserves. So you're going to have to start some stuff on the board. If you're going to do that, you want to have the delivery mechanism for them, and the trucks are a really great option there. They also provide really easy crossfire markers because you can fire the autocannons to get them very simply. But and at the same time, that those autocannons are actually pretty good a lot of the time. 2 damage is always useful. So I think that's one. I think in terms of excitement, I think the thing that I'm most excited for to try, or I want to see in bat reps, and I think the thing that I think most people are most excited for, and if anybody has seen any bat reps or people are trying this, is lots of Atalan Jackals. As I talked about before, I've got 6 currently on the painting desk. Again, another bloody excellent model. I'll grab one here, but look, it's a quad bike in Warhammer 40k. It's genius. Like, there's all these sculpts. They've all got like random weapons as well. One of them's carrying a spanner. One of them's carrying a crowbar.
Yeah,
amazing. So they're just so good. But I think that's something that I'm really excited for. Points wise, they seem to have come out at a bit of a steal. So they are 12 points a model. For 12 points, you get 2 wounds, you get 14-inch movement, you get a 9-inch pre-move, so that's 23 inches turn 1. They can fall back and charge, they're -1 to hit, so they're -1 to hit, toughness 4, 5 up save, and then there's a whole bunch of buffs you can put on top of that. Additionally, as we spoke about before, we got the Acolyte Icon Award, and so you can res D3 models a turn. Now, the reason this is so good, everybody will remember, I'm sure, at the start of 9th edition, one of the things people were very upset about, if you cast your mind back, people used to hate Space Marines. It seems like so long ago now. People hated Space Marines with a passion, and one of the things that the Space Marine book did was it said, you can resurrect an ATV with a Chief Apothecary for free every turn, and everyone went, that is broken. Well, I'm here to tell you that the Atalan Jackal Wolf Quad is 25 points with a mining laser. It is 30 points. Sorry, it's 24 points with the mining laser. And that means and they have 4 wounds a pop. 2 of them is therefore 78 points, 8 wounds a pop. It's basically the same as an ATV. Your Jackal will allow you to resurrect 2 of those every single turn. So the first 8 wounds you take, you put them on the 2 Atalan Jackals, you resurrect them next turn.
Oh, on the Wolf Quads?
On the Wolf Quads. So they're really, really good. You can buff their defensibility even further. There's a whole bunch of cults that can make them tougher. You can give them like mini transhuman. You can give them +1 arm save. You can give them ignoring AP. You can give them a 5-up invuln. There's a whole bunch of stuff they can get access to. The Biophagus can buff them now with a 5-up Filament Pain. So I think that lots of Atalan Jackals is probably the first thing I'm most excited for. We'll see. It's like I say, it's early days. I haven't played with the book, but I would be surprised if that doesn't have at least some play. So that's definitely the first thing.
That's really cool. Like I didn't even think about like that sort of combo. That's one of the reasons why I'm so grateful, and 2, I'm so excited to be able to talk to someone like you who has so much experience with this army in particular, that you can see these kinds of connections that a newer player like me would probably miss. And by probably, I mean most definitely. Because I would just have my icon word just following around some neophytes, just being like, stay alive, stay alive, stay alive, when my bikes are over here being like, hey, can you... No? Okay.
Yeah. There's one thing about them that I'm particularly interested to see, and I want to try, because you can actually give them all combat weapons now. So there's 3 points. So for 3 points, you'd get 2 attacks, strength 4 -2, 1 damage, instead of strength 4, no AP, 1 damage. And so, and that's quite interesting. That gives them a little bit. That gives them a bit of punch. I'm not sure whether it's worth 3 points a model, but I guess we'll see. So that's something that I'm very excited for.
What about the satchel charge thing? Is that still
a demo charge? Yeah, so I would still take 2 demo charges in the squads, because I'm expecting them to survive for multiple turns. So I definitely think you're going to get to use 2 of them at least. And so yeah, I know that they're still great demo charges. It's still awesome. It's the demo bomb as it was is not the same. It's you're not lobbing all of these. You're not deploying a big unit and deploying loads of demo bombs just to kill 1 unit.
That was the dream. Yeah. I wanted a unit of 12 bikes, drive-by demolitions, and just like all of them just kind of like in a parade go sailing past a tank, and just everyone just overhead arm throws a grenade and just runs.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%. So the second thing that I'm very excited for is kind of just how good we are going to be at playing the mission. So like I say, we're quite uniquely placed, I think, to score well in Chapter 3 2022, because you get bonuses for being troops and for being infantry, and not many troop infantry units can deep strike. And so that means that for us, having just simple 5-man squads of acolytes, I think taking like 2 of those is probably going to remain a staple in all Genestealer Cult armies, because that's going to mean you're going to get like it's 90 points, but you're going to get 2 secondaries incredibly easily. And then you just got assets on the board, which is just really fantastic to have. So yeah, they're definitely, it's a simple one, I think, but I think really important, and something that's going to be pretty integral. Everyone knows how good Tyranids are now, right? We've all seen how amazing the Leviathan supplement is, one of the best armies in the game, and yet they're still teching in for those acolytes because they're so good at playing the mission. So I think that'll probably remain the same.
Okay, perfect. So we've got Deep Strike working with regards to and for those of you who weren't aware, like something like retrieve Nachmund data, I believe is the new one. It used to be you just performed an action and you got it.
Yeah.
But now it's the number of units you have, or the number of models you have in the unit has to be above 3 to perform it. So you can't do the whole like Deep Strike Elictor, like for Tyranids in this case, and just be like, perform the action, done.
So it's you're close. So I think retrieve Nachmund data is actually the new name, I should say. But I think the way it works in Chapter 3 2022 is that I don't think there's a minimum requirement on unit size. However, if you're not a troop, you get -1 to the roll. I think if you are a troop, you get +1 to the roll. If you're a troop, you get -1 to the roll. That's it. If you're a troop unit, you get -1 to the roll. And in order to perform the action, you need to roll a dice, and you need to roll equal to or under the number of models in the squad. So you can technically do, I think, retrieve Nachmund data, R&D, someone put in the chat. That's really much simpler to say, with a Lictor, but you'd have to roll a 1 each time. And that's not that reliable. I hope, on a massive side, but I hope Lictors get a purpose in the Tyranid book. But I think overwhelmingly it's very, very good for GSC, because it's worse for everybody else. And it's worse for us because we still might fail on occasion when things get killed. But at the same time, it's so much worse for everyone else. It massively removes the viability of your 2-man Crusader squads, your Crypto Thralls, your Servitors, all of these types of units that you used to see. That they now have much less purpose, and so that's really good for us, because obviously what's worse for everyone else is better for us on average.
Which is good because it's mixing up the meta. We're not seeing things play. And granted, this is from the perspective of like, a lot of things seem to be put in the lens of a competitive perspective, like a tournament type competitive perspective. I really liked Winter's perspective on the thing that there should be, you know, like the super casual open war play, there should be matched play and then competitive play. And right now matched and competitive are kind of intermingled. And I would like the idea of matched being kind of like the middle ground and competitive being the thing that there's a book coming out every 6 months for, and match play is a more like maybe a yearly book of missions that are a bit more simple. But the idea of switching up the competitive meta so you don't see the same Drukhari list winning every single tournament, the same AdMech list winning every single tournament, it's boring. And for some people with certain armies, it's just not fun. Actually, like I still maintain, I'm pretty sure people who play AdMech just don't know how to have fun. It's just like, hold on, I'm gonna take the next 20 minutes to tell you all the things all these units are gonna do in a very specific order. These are the people who do calculus on their weekends instead of crossword puzzles. Yeah, take that, AdMech players. Shots fired. Take it. Deal with it.
I mean, sure. I think so on to the third unit. The third unit I'm probably most excited for is, I think, going to be at Aberrants, because we all watched, lots of people watched Warhammer Plus's Angels of Death, and like we saw what Aberrants could do in that, and they were awesome. They were really great in that. They actually, did some real damage to Space Marines, and we were like, yes, this is what Aberrants should do, right? This makes sense. And of course, their rules did not represent that fact. But actually, I think Aberrants are in a pretty good spot right now. So it's now, the profile has changed quite a bit. So as I said, one of the things that's changed is, as we talked about before, they don't have the picks. And the picks was more like you get more attacks, but they were at lower damage. Now you only have one heavy damage attack. So you get 2 attacks hitting on 3s, I think -2 and 3 damage. Now that's of course an anti-tank profile. That's going to be the main purpose of them. You can buff them further, and you have to be properly leaning into it. But if you wanted to, you could be dealing like 4 attacks a model at 3 damage. I will say that's not like going to be standard, I don't think, but potentially some people will lean into it. And I think that that's really cool. I think they've got some play. I think that their survivability is good. I'm fine for them not to be the most survivable thing in the game. I don't think they should have, a 4-up invuln or whatever. But they're T5. They've got a 5-up save and then -1 damage, and you can give them a 5-up feel no pain. And I think that that's really good. And especially, one of the biggest weaknesses of them was the fact that they couldn't make charges. And I guess this is kind of 2 points in one. But I think it's important to talk about how probably the biggest change, in my opinion, with this book, compared to 8th edition, is the fact that we can now charge out of Deep Strike. I know that sounds silly because of the fact that, we are Genestealer cults, but before it was the case that our charging out of Deep Strike just wasn't reliable. It was so all over the place. You have to be making 9s on 2 dice or spend 3 CP to buff 1 unit, and even then, if you roll a 1, it wasn't that good. So, yeah, it wasn't that great. And now it's the case that we've got +1 to charge, and I should have mentioned on the last point. You can now deep strike any acolyte squad 6 inches away from your opponent. You can steal an objective and do rod. That's going to catch so many people out competitively. That's an amazingly powerful ability. There's also an upgrade you could pay for to deep strike 3 inches away. I don't even think you're going to need that, because if your opponent is screening out 6 inches across their board, that's so good. That's really powerful. So yeah, you've got that, and the fact that there's also an upgrade that allows you to get a 3d6 discarding the lowest charge, and so that is absolutely amazing. So that means we will consistently be able to make charges. It's like a 90% charge rate, and you can stack that with things like the Acolyte Icon War giving you buffs to charge. Cult with the 4-armed Emperor gives you rerolls. It's just so good. The charging is now reliable out of Deep Strike. That's what we needed. And so, yeah, things like Aberrants now have much more play, because you generally don't want them trundling up the board. because they're too they're just too slow, and they could get tied up with hordes, etc. So the fact that we can now charge out a deep strike is amazing. I don't know if you'll see many of them. They're still quite expensive. They're a very tough profile to evaluate because they're a quote unquote tough unit, but they're still quite easy to kill. Like, they'll still die to bolters. You know, like, it'll be winning on 5s, but outside of that, anything with any AP will rinse them still. So I guess we'll see. But yeah, I'm so excited to play. That's the thing.
When I saw +1 wound, +1 toughness for them, I was very excited because I do have a 5-man unit of Aberrants, and I'm like I think I might need more. Like not an insane amount, but like 5 more. I mean, treating them like a deep striking, like heat seeking missile for like you know, a Plague Burst crawler just sitting in the backfield, just like, okay, here we go, buddy. Whomp, bonk, gone. And and then it's just done. You don't have to worry about it. And they're like, okay, they've traded up, they can die, or you know, maybe I'll get a few more kills with them. Great, but being able to, that's also part of the mentality of using Genestealer Cult that I have to like really wrap my head around, like, because if you're playing Custodes and you lose a unit in one turn, something's gone horribly wrong.
Yeah.
In Genestealer Cult, if you only lose one, it's the best turn you've ever had.
Yeah, I mean, against Custodes, I think they're very good. But yeah, that's the thing. They've definitely got some really favorable matchups. So if it's the case that the meta at the time doesn't have massive amounts of shooting, doesn't have massive amounts of screening, then they could be, and you know, let's say it has a lot of -1 damage. Like if there was a Plague Marine Death Guard meta, they'd be very, very good. But yeah, it's very hard to say. I'm very tempted to give two, you know, talk about them in a certain way because they're absolutely the kind of thing that will see the person that was 1 LVO has got 30 Aberrants, 30 bikes, a Kelemorph, and like some random stuff. Because unfortunately that's how competitive 40k can go sometimes. People just find some crazy efficiency and just push it to its max.
Looking at you, squid buggies.
Yeah, exactly. So I definitely think that's the thing that happened. And exactly what you're talking about in terms of, you know, your opponent having that Plague Burst Crawler. It's 150 points, but it's 150 points to change your opponent's mentality about the game. Because now they are screening out all of their powerful assets incredibly conservatively. And you know what? Even if they then don't get to land and kill their ideal target, that could well be worth it, right? You're manipulating your opponent with 150 points worth of stuff. That's actually pretty good. And then if your opponent does make any mistakes, you can pounce on it. So, like, yeah, absolutely awesome.
Yeah, the whole idea of like, okay, well, now they're looking at me like, okay, well, I need to protect this Plague Burst crawler. I guess I'm just leaning on Death Guard as this specific example because it's the one that's actually seeming to work in my head. Like they have a unit of Poxwalkers. Poxwalkers are super slow, but Poxwalkers can do those horrible mulching, mortal wound bomb sort of attacks if you use the right command point or the right stratagems. Rather than the slow trundling like bomb that you know is going to hit you with those mortal wounds, like, you know, take out a Goliath Rock Grinder or something, it's now having to screen out the backfield. And even just for a turn or two, being able to have no fear from a Poxwalker unit, like, or even having them use their spread the sickness on objectives to get them command points. Like, you've cost them command points, you've cost them the ability to kill your units for 150 points.
Yeah.
And if they decide I need to get up there, then you just blow up their tank, which is a trade up. And it's paid for itself either way. Also, Valthek, thank you so much for rating in, and hello, fellow loyal followers of the Four-Armed Emperor. You know what they say, many hands make for a little heresy. So yeah, welcome in. Thank you so much for the raid, the great weirdling. Zambies, hello. Zambies, Sandman, if you weren't aware, is one of the most talented painters I've ever met. She's really good. So she's also one of my D&D players because I do a charity D&D game every so often throughout the year, and it's called Dungeons and Degenerates, and she is one of my degenerates. So it's a good time.
I was supposed to be starting like a D&D campaign tomorrow, but I said to my friend, I was like, I'm too excited to do anything more than 40k this weekend. So yeah, I had to postpone that.
Okay, well, I'm knowing that now. I'm gonna take this conversation and we're gonna take this off ramp on a tangent. We will come back, but when it comes to D&D, give us the cliff notes, your history with it. How long have you been playing D&D? What's your favorite class to play? Have you ever dungeon mastered a game? Any like, and then one anecdote. I want one Dungeons and Dragons anecdote, like one cool thing, one funny thing.
Yeah. So I got this. So I haven't got a massive amount of experience with D&D. I think I can only obsess about one thing at a time. But yeah, I played, like a lot of people, played a bit in high school, got back into it, and then we did a campaign over lockdown, which was a lot of fun. And Quipster was in it as well. And I really liked my class over this campaign, which is I was a half-orc warlock. And I rolled really badly on the stats. And so I was like, okay, this could be fun. So I could kind of lean into this. So I went on like, I made him like incredibly low strength and stuff, but he was a character who he thought he was really strong, and he constantly wanted to prove himself. And so, because of, in his tribe, strength was of course massively revered, and so he would constantly be the first one to charge in and stuff, but then just have the crap beat out of him, which was quite funny. However, he was a warlock, and so he had made a pact with a dark power in order to gain the strength that his brethren were born with, as it were. And I really liked that. It was a lot of fun. Like, yeah, he was really cool, and he had like, he's got all magic based. Like he had like armor made out of shadows, and he had like I like shillelagh. I just like it as a weapon. I just think it's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So he would just have a stick that would like glow up like a lightsaber. It was a lot of fun. In my head, every combat starting was really cool. I would take me like I'd waste like at least like a turn and a half just powering up. But I just when thematically it adds a lot to the experience for me. But one thing that's quite funny, this is true, I don't know if Quipster's still in the chat. So Quipster's character used to act like a dick to my character, and then and I remember this time when Quipster's character said something really patronizing to me, and so I cast Shape Change, and I went into this store, and I insulted the store manager, and then left. So the way Quipster went in, he did not get a welcome response, as it were. That was really fun. yeah.
See, that's the kind of D&D like interplay, role play that I, as a dungeon master, I have a pretty significant history with Dungeons and Dragons, but that's the kind of stuff that when I see my players interact in that sort of way and do it in character and still have it be fun for all parties involved, that's gold. That's what makes me feel good when I see my players doing that. So to see like you and Quipster, who of course are already good friends, have that sort of hilarious tit for tat repartee in game is just mwah. And it's hilarious that you played a half-orc warlock that had that kind of a backstory, because that is literally the backstory for a Goliath warlock that I played for a year and a half. He was, he was a little bit smaller than all the other Goliaths, not as strong, and he made a deal with a demon to have a bunch of power so that he could like summon a big like halberd and just like absolutely wreck face and eldritch blast with it, like essentially like I didn't realize it at the time because I wasn't playing Warhammer, but he essentially had a guardian spear. That was his weapon, because he would fire eldritch blast with it and then slash people up.
Very cool. Yeah, I love that. No, for sure.
But if you want a fusion, maybe this is something that we might have to do in the future, but this is something that I kickstarted. This is a D&D, like, I mean, it's D&D, but it's cool. Space. It's in space. All the stuff is formatted to be guns and laser weapons and stuff. So if you like sci-fi and you like D&D, it's D&D, so cool. But in space. I have all the PDFs for it and stuff. I'll send it your way for personal use, or maybe we can do a Discord thing with, maybe I'll get you to insult intergalactic store managers on Quipster's behalf in space. But yeah, that's choice. God, I love D&D. I haven't played it in ages. Actually, funny enough, lockdown is what killed it for our group, because playing over Discord, it is definitely not the same. And some of the players, like, just they're like, guys, I love it, I love the game, but I just can't vibe like this.
Yeah, I think it was kind of half and half. I think because that is true. But the thing is, because it was like lockdown, and you know, it was obviously you hadn't seen your friends in so long and stuff. It was nice to at least do something. That's the thing. But yeah, no, I totally, yeah, I do totally get what you mean. Yeah, I do really want to DM at some point. That is something I would really like to do. But yeah, I guess we'll see.
Funny enough, I think playing Warhammer, especially if you've done even remotely narrative campaigns, not like a full crusade, but just like a remotely narrative game, you already have all the mental tools you need to play D&D and run it as a DM, because the idea of balance, the idea of setting up a narrative, both visually and, you know, like speaking like narratively, it's now watching in the gym. Yeah, I was about to say, I think Quipster said he was going to be working out, so we were going to have to tell him, like, okay, Quip, whatever exercise you're doing right now, you have to do an extra set.
Yeah.
So please, I just hope this was his like max weight
extra
set.
Sets for extra arms.
And he had, yep, double sets, double arms for the Emperor. May the star gods be praised, and all that stuff.
I'm pretty certain you can talk him into playing with a Guardian Spear the next time he plays D&D, though. I imagine that would be quite an easy sell.
Oh, I would in a heartbeat for Quipster, if he were to play in this space D&D game. We would just find 2 weapons, fuse them together. I'm a big fan of homebrewing and just making shit up.
Yeah.
So if he wanted to play somebody that had a weapon that was equivalent to a Guardian Spear, because there is a race in the game that are kind of like Egyptian bird people. But if you just put that guy in a full set of golden armor and gave him a shooty spear, he's essentially a custodian. More bench it is. Yes. Yes. So, oh crap, I totally lost my train of thought. Damn it. I hate when this happens. I was doing so well. This is
about Genestealer Cults.
Probably. If there was one selling point, if there was one thing for somebody in the audience right now, let's say Zambies here was like, I've never played 40K, but this Genestealer Cult thing sounds cool. Oh, Reza's here. Holy crap. What's up, Reza? If Zambies had never played 40K and was like, these Genestealer cults sound interesting, how would you sell? Not let's just assume selling 40K is not part of your job description. Sell Genestealers as an army.
Genestealers as an army. Okay. So I guess the thing is about Genestealers that this would be from the interaction with the person. I'm not a salesman, so I don't know why I'm talking like this, but having met the person, there's kind of 2 avenues for GSC that I think are particularly not necessarily unique, but I think they do really, really well in the series, which is that you can either go down just the incredibly fun side of things. So one of the things that gets really underrated about GSC, in my opinion, is that kind of orc. There's things that are normally associated with things like orcs, the heavily converted part. So we spoke about Brood Brothers. So one of the things that I love to do is take all like the named characters of the Imperial Guard and turn them into GSC, because that's so fun and just so crazy stuff. You can make absolutely awesome things. All your Ridge Runners, all your Rock Grinders, you can do massively converted stuff. There's so, like, you can have a Genestealer Cult on any world, and as we know, there are thousands and thousands of worlds in the Imperium. So like, you can have any theme you want. People do Mad Max, people do Agri World, people do like heavy mining worlds, people do water worlds, people do all kinds of stuff which you can do. So the modeling side of things is so unique. So not necessarily unique, because the things that orcs also have it as well, but like, yeah, so fantastic. So that's one side of things. But I think the other side of things, kind of narratively about that, is really cool. It's just how insidious it is. Like, just thinking about the cycle of Genestealer cults, and you force these human beings to love these aliens like their children, and they throw away their whole lives to serve this cause. It's so dark when you think about it, and some Angels of Death did a pretty good job of it actually, and some books do a pretty good job of just showing how devastating it is, and just like horrible to think about it in reality. So that's a big part of things. And I think playstyle wise, like the thing is about Genestealer cults is one of the things that I don't not dislike, but I don't like to give too much credence to is when people talk about Genestealer cults actually being a really complicated army. And the reason for that is purely because it can push people away. And actually, I think you should look at it in terms of just a positive if you're thinking about starting the army. Because as I spoke about today, you can make a really mechanized GSC list. And you can make a very standard army that has a bunch of vehicles in it. It'll be super easy to play, and you'll have a great time. And then as you grow as a player, you can add in complexity as you'd like. Like if you just take one of every unit in your Genestealer Cult army, then you have an absolutely awesome time. It's an absolutely fantastic range to get to know. And some armies you don't get that second part of things. You get the first part. Like if you play a lot of factions, it's like, wow, it's really easy to play with to start with, and then it's like down the road, you're just gonna get I mean, bored is a harsh word, but like, are you going to find them less interesting? And are you more likely to drop out of the hobby? With Genestealer cults, there's constantly things you can be trying, and it's great. I think also in terms of this book, the codex balance is really good, and that doesn't come about very often. One of the most common messages today, I think, has been, what cult would you choose? And maybe one will come out on top. I don't know, but it's really not clear at this point because not only are the cults well balanced, but the units are pretty well balanced. So you can build your army multiple ways, and that means that depending on how you build your army, if you've got loads of bikes, that obviously benefits from some cults that building loads of neophytes won't do. And so it's really the case that there's a bunch of stuff that is good. There might of course be a best thing, but you spoke before about how we shouldn't always talk about competitive play. And if you're someone that's not a top tier competitive player, you can build a good army very easily.
That is so good to hear, because when you said, like, if you have one of everything, you're going to have a good time and it's a great place to start, because that is essentially what I have is roundabouts one of every. Yeah, I have an obscene amount of bikes, but I have enough to make like 2 10-man units of neophyte hybrids with like a fair smattering. I didn't know what heavy weapons were going to be the best, so I just kind of made a little bit of each. I hedged my bets in that regard, which I also advise, just like don't just build them all the same thing. That's boring. Like, okay, seismic cannon, okay, mining laser. Like,
it's like even the balance just across the units is pretty good, as you say. Like when you look at all the acolyte weapons, like again, like I'm immediately getting some favorites. I particularly, because of how I play GSC, I really like the rock cutters personally, and I also really like the drills. But like the swords are also amazing, and they're also great, and especially if you build for them. So they're all pretty good. The weapons on the Achilles Ridge Runners. You've got the mortar, which is a mortar, so that's always useful. You've got the missile launcher now, and of course the mining laser. And all of those 3 options are actually pretty good. So if you build that variety, like you'll have a pretty good time. Like it might not be the most efficient thing ever, but like I think as you were talking about earlier, it's so easy to look at battle reports because obviously most of the top channels at the moment seem to be top tier competitive players, and so that normalizes min-maxing, and you don't have to do that. You can make what is even like an A tier army. But like if Genestealer cults are, let's say, A tier, if you build a B tier army, so a really good army, that seems terrible because it's like, oh well, if I changed all of these things, they'd all be better. But it's like, yeah, but like, are you still gonna win against these factions most likely and lose against these factions most likely? Yes, it's still gonna play out the same way matchup wise. So like, yeah, it's such a good book. I think I'm massively biased, but because I was thinking this and I saw a lot of people post today, I think it's probably my favorite book in terms of the balance of the book, in terms of the rules that they've done. I know some people are finding Crossfire and Exposed quite complicated. But I think over time, it's quite a natural rule to play with. Like, Expo Crossfire is tracer fire. That's how you look at it. So if you shoot something, you're gonna be, the other units see that tracer fire shots, so then they focus in on it. If you're exposed, if you've got a pincer maneuver, you've got one from the right flank, one from the left flank. How cool is that? Like, it's just it's so awesome. So
it adds a lot of dynamic to the it's making, I know a lot of people, yourself included, love to say that, and correctly say that, the movement phase is the most important phase of the game. But for the Crossfire rule, and specifically for exposed, it makes it not only important but dynamic and interesting. It becomes more like, even more like a chess game, where you're like, okay, and now I sweep around this way, and like all of a sudden you are now in a pincer movement. Haha, I'm a genius. So there's a lot of dynamics for every phase of the game. I guess that's another great selling point, is you really get to enjoy every single phase of the game.
True, yeah.
Unlike sisters or custodies, like, you just don't do a psychic phase. You just don't. You're just like, and psychic phase, done. Moving on to the shooting phase.
I totally agree. I mean, I think it's you get a lot of exposure to the game. I think one of the things that for me is quite important for what makes a kind of a fun army, and this is personal opinion. It's not so much when we talk about difficulty. I don't mean difficult like that. People can sometimes conflate difficulty as like, how bad is the army. Like, when I talk about difficulty, what I like to think of it in terms of how hard it is to play, it's about the number of decisions you have to make in a turn. And Crossfire is a great example there. So there are going to be many times in the game of Warhammer 40k where you're going to have to go, okay, so I can go here, get +1 to wound, or I can go here and get on a point, for example. Or I can tie things up, or I can tie things up, or I can go back a bit and get access to a psychic. You're going to have to make decisions, like a lot of decisions, quite quickly. And that is the complexity of the army. It's not like when the book was not doing so well, the 8th Ed book, it wasn't, it's not that I didn't like it because it was bad. I liked it because I'd have to think a lot when I was playing the game. And I came from a background of Tau, and Tau in 8th edition, if you're familiar with them, was very straightforward. I would just, and it was very nice to learn on, because I would just, mark car up the board and sit in the middle of the board for the whole game. But like, I played Genestealer Cults, and it's honestly, it was like twice the number of decisions I had to make. And so that's why I love this book, because it's like a thing that is normally the case that something will come out on top. And I'm sure some genius on Art of War or someone is going to come up with a list that probably beats the rest. But like, the amount of options that have credence is high, is really high for the percentage of the book. So yeah, love it.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to, I saw a question here about the Tyranids. Like, is there any rules for Tyranid allies with the new codex, or is it just kind of like pure army stuff that they've been kind of repeatedly doing with these codexes?
Yeah, so yes, it's the same kind of thing. So the only difference with allying with GSC is in terms of Brood Brothers. So the allying is standard. So if you take Tyranids, you lose overrule, and the rule that you lose is Crossfire.
Oh,
so that's what you lose. So I mean, if Hive Guard are obviously incredible, you do. So I don't know. Maybe the top players will still look at Hive Guard and they'll math hammer it, and they'll still take them. But personally, I wouldn't, because I love playing as pure faction personally, and I don't have anything against Soup. It's just how I like to play. But the difference with Genestealer Cult is that if you take guard, you can take up to 25% of your army, so 500 points in a 2,000 point game. And if you take up to that, you don't lose the Crossfire rule, which is pretty cool. So I like that quite a lot, as rules go. But yeah,
+1 to hit Lehman Russ. Here we go. Yeah.
Oh, so it does. Sorry, so it doesn't affect the Brood Brothers units. Sorry, I should have said.
And now I cry.
Yeah, so that's the thing about Brood Brothers, is they are, because they get +2. Your Lehman Russ have +2 leadership. Hey, so you have +2 leadership, and your Brood Brother models, infantry, they can use in questioning loyalty. Which, as we talked about, is not the greatest ability. So that's why competitively you don't really see much guard. because it's pretty much a direct downgrade on the guard book. You also can't use warlord traits, you can't use relics, you can't use things like tank commander. So it's like, yeah, it's like if you were going to build into it at some point, you just play guard. But yeah, that's kind of the truth of it.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we've been talking a lot about like playing, and I know you alluded to some really cool narrative type stuff. To kind of like start wrapping things up, I want to know what are some interesting pieces of lore or little bits of like some things you really enjoyed from like books or even like little snippets out of a codex that add to the flavor of the Genestealers. What do you got for me? What are some cool bits?
The first thing I want to talk about, and this is great. I thought that this was so cool when I read Belisari is cool. So I didn't know this when I started collecting Genestealer Cults, and I didn't know this when I collected my first army of Warhammer 40k when I was a kid, which was, I looked in that, I opened the codex, I think it was like the 4th edition or 5th edition, one of those, and I think, yeah, it would have been 4th, I think. And I opened that book and I was like, what's the coolest scheme? And I picked Sides of the Emperor. One of the coolest schemes in Warhammer 40k, a bunch of bumblebees. It's just absolutely beautiful. I did it no justice. Incredibly hard scheme to paint well. Black and yellow, no room for mistakes. But I loved it. I loved that scheme so much. I loved all the people that converted sides as their weapons. I thought it was just the coolest thing. And when you, it's not really spoiling because it's really established lore at this point and it's kind of moved on. So I apologize. The Size of the Emperor storyline is really important to people. They do have the 2 books are actually really good. So go read those. However, one of the things that we find out in Belisari is cool, the great work, I should say, is that the Size of the Emperor were actually undone by the Genestealer cults. So if you've read the Horus Heresy, you'll know about the importance of Sotha and the Pharos beacon on Sotha. And the Size of the Emperor were the chapter. I didn't know this when I was a kid, of course, but I found it out when I got back to the hobby. The Size of the Emperor, their job was to, they were based on Sotha, and one of the important things about this chapter was to look after the Pharos beacon, make sure it's working. And a Genestealer cult uprising actually happened on Sotha, and this meant that when the High Fleet approached, the defense systems were disabled, and so the High Fleet absolutely just decimated the planet, and also the Size of the Emperor. And so it was actually so like cool for me because it was like my new army actually killed my old army, and like it was almost like therapeutic. It was like out with I'm done with that part of my life. I've now moved on and played Genestealer Cults 1. So I was like, that was really cool. So that was a particularly fun thing about the GSC. And that book, actually, one of the subplots of that book is the final firstborn Size of the Emperor, because they never caught the Patriarch, and so they go back to Sotha to find the Patriarch that was responsible for the death of their planet.
That's fantastic. The fact that everything lined up like that for you is just mwah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's tasty. My favorite piece of my 2, actually, they're tied. One is a lore snippet, and the other is a bit from a book. A bit from a book is from what has to be my favorite 40k novel of all time, which is The Infinite of the Divine. I think that is not only the best Necron book, although I've heard pretty good things about the Twice Dead King, so I need to get around to listening to that. But boy howdy, Infinite and Divine, fantastic book. Cannot recommend it enough, people. But there is the line that because a Genestealer cult uprising happens because of a prank, thousands of years or like several hundred years previous, and Orican turns to Trazyn, "Trazyn, you fool! You got us box seats to a coup!" And it's like because a Genestealer had psychically affected an entire auditorium of people during a play, and it was just mwah. But my favorite piece of lore is after all of these generations and generations, hundreds of years potentially of undermining and infiltrating, these Genestealers rise up. They fight alongside their Tyranid brethren, sometimes even to help take the planet, and psychically they're still linked. So the Genestealers don't get killed by the Tyranids. They're all fighting together, and the battle is over. They have won. The planet is taken. And they then march the Genestealers to the biovats. And they're still, again, psychically linked to the hive mind. And they tell them, you know, step off into the biovats to be converted into biomass. And that psychic link is severed, like right as they like step off the precipice to fall. So in that last like second and a half before they experience excruciating pain, they realize, oh my God, what have I done? I was doing this all under the influence of an alien mind. So there's this horrible moment of realization, like, oh no, and then they're dead. And it's the most grimdark thing that it made me love the Genestealers even more, that I get to look at my army and be like, oh, you guys are so screwed. Either way, you're just done.
Yeah. I think in the Codex, some of my favorite, because I feel like there's a bit with something really similar. It's a insidious nature of the Genestealer Cult. There's a bit in I don't remember what book it is, but there's a Magus who, like the patriarch is killed, and she obviously regains her sanity, and just like how that breaks her as a person is pretty crazy. But my favorite in the book actually is one of the things you learn when you collect Genestealer Cult is how a lot of the races reproduce, because of course it's quite important to the life cycle of the generation. So I think there's some really interesting bits of lore there. So one of the things is Genestealer Cult Orcs, which GW do support, because there's actually in one of the White Dwarfs recently, they actually covered how you can convert Genestealer Cult Orcs, which was cool. But they actually say that like you don't really get Genestealer Cult Orc uprisings because orcs will kill anything that's not orky. So they have a very good natural defense mechanism. Eldar are incredibly hard to make Genestealer Cult uprisings because it's not like they reproduce over such a slow period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not, it's not like humans. It's like a 6-month period of time or something. So but there is still a period. And I haven't read this book, but I read someone was talking about this, and I thought it was really interesting. But there is a bit in a book where there's even I think this is in the Codex. There's a Genestealer Cult Avatar of Cain. Like it's just, I don't know how that worked, but how cool is that? Like, so there's some definite conversion opportunity there, and I think the Tau one was very quite funny. So the Earthcast, they captured some Genestealers, and they put them in a massive dome, and then of course they sent in some poor lower members of the cast into the dome, and to monitor how the process worked and to look at how actually Genestealer cults and how they actually grow and how they take over worlds. And of course, as was due to happen, there was an explosion, and the cult got out. And I think ultimately they had to commit exterminatus or whatever the Tau equivalent is on the planet to actually deal with it in the end. But it's quite cool, and that's another thing you can do, right? You can really go crazy. Like the bladed cog conversions that you see are so good. Like, I love those always.
Yeah, I'm excited to pick a cult to work. Actually, I guess one final mechanics question is there going to be a similar system to how like Space Marine chapters work? Like there are the established ones, and then there's the kind of like make your own with like a series of abilities that you can pick. Can you make your own cult?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah. So if you do the make your own cult, the way it works is you get 4 points, and there are a bunch of abilities that you can choose from, and they all have a points cost.
Oh.
So what that actually means is that you can actually get 4 abilities for your Genestealer cult. So it's like having a chance if you've got 4 abilities. Now, of course, those 4 abilities aren't as powerful necessarily as having some of the classic ones, as it were. But some of them are pretty good, and you can build some really tasty stuff. It wouldn't surprise me at all if that's the way people go competitively. There are some great strategies, relics, stratagems, relics, etc., that you don't get access to, but yeah, they are pretty good, and you can build some really useful stuff. If you've got a specific vision for how you want your cult to play, then it might be the best way to go, genuinely.
Awesome. That's good. That adds to for someone like me. Like I always paint custom schemes so I can justify being able to play whatever I want. And that added bonus of like for sisters, like you want to make an Order Minoris, go nuts. Like you can mix and match, make your own. Like if I can make my own Custodes shield host, yes, please. But I doubt. But knowing that I can do that with my Genestealer Cult is even tastier. Like being able to make something unique. Especially, I love a points buy system. Like again, like D&D, being able to like slot your stats in if you so choose, or roll dice. I'm a huge fan of low stats. Like when I run a game, it's a requirement that everyone has once you roll all your stats, but one of your stats will be an 8. You will have a requirement to have one of your stats be an 8.
Yeah.
So
no, I get what you mean. Yeah.
I think that leads to a lot more flavorful games because
I mean I think it's kind of a classic D&D thing. It's like a lot of people's first campaign is my character, his thing is he is from this area and he is the greatest warrior of all time. A lot of people tend to do that on their first run of D&D, but then you quickly realize that actually in terms of fun, it's not actually necessarily what you want to do. And that, I think that's quite typical.
You should make a NIDS sandworm conversion. I'll tell you, I do have plans to do a full sculpt. If you're aware of the because these are inspired by Dune. But if you've read or heard of the Dune novels, there is God Emperor Leto II, who is like half worm, half human, and he's got 4 arms. And there's this great painting of him with like 2 hands, like with steepled fingers, and another set of hands like lower down, like on a worm body with like a human torso coming out of it. Really creepy, very grimdark. I want to try to convert that, or not convert. I want to fully sculpt, milliput, green stuff, the whole 9 yards, armatures. I want to make that into a patriarch. So that would be really cool. And I think making a sandworm, if you were going to make a Dune sandworm out of a NIDS model, I would think probably
that's tough.
What would it be? I don't know. I'll have to think on that. I don't know why my mind went to Old One Eye.
I think the Rock Grinder fits the best because it's like a big thing in combat. But
no, you're right. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Making it a not a NIDS model, but make it a dedicated Rock Grinder type model. I would have to like get the profile, like the base profile of a Rock Grinder, because it doesn't have a base, and just like make one to kind of fit those dimensions. Because I have a need that if I convert something or if I work on something, I don't want to change its outward profile too much.
Yeah.
Because
I totally get what you mean.
I have a genuine fear of being like having someone claim that I'm like modeling for advantage, and I'm like, I'm not, I swear. Yeah. I just want things to look cool.
Like that, I totally get what you mean. Like one of the things about my army is like it's heavily converted in the sense that pretty much every single model has a conversion, but it's also not heavily converted in the sense that I have not completely remade the models. It was just like when I went through it, I realized that a lot of the stuff that looked like it was made for mining laces could, with some tweaks, look like they were made for at least farming in the 41st millennium. So, for example, rock grinders with some tweaks, it looks like a combine harvester, right? Like things like Atalan jackals, they fit so well in the idea of a farm, right? All of my neophytes have got farmers caps. All that kind of thing. Acolytes, aberrants have scythes instead of hammers. All these sort of things. Like, I'm totally with you. I wanted it to look like I wanted it to be the case that I could buy, let's say, the Saboteur. If Games Workshop release a new Genestealer model, I can buy that, paint it up, put it next to my army, and it still fits.
I think.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I know exactly how, if I was in your shoes, how I would make a farmer Saboteur. Because she's got the detonator next to her, right? Yeah, If you do a green stuff hose and then you put a tiny little wire like nozzle on the end of the detonator, so connect the hose to the detonator so it's like a handle, and then she's got a little nozzle on it, and then put a little like skull and crossbones, like she's spraying pesticide, and give her a big wide brim hat. So
that's a good one. I have to think. So I actually I was saying to you, I didn't buy Shadowthrone set. But basically just her I needed. However, I have been working on a conversion. So what I've gone for is she grows very explosive turnips, and
How very Mario of you.
Yeah, so I have been so I do quite an easy, I keep the vegetables that I do quite simple green step wise. I try to hit a line of like it's fun, but it's not so silly that it takes away from people that take their, because I'm like, I love my Dark Angels, right? And I take my Dark Angels quite seriously. So I want it to be the case, if I play against somebody who take their army very, very seriously, it still feels like it makes sense. Like it's not completely ridiculous, but freebooters are a thing. So I guess there's some ground there to cover. Yes, I've been working on some turnips, and I was just thinking, I've still got the detonators mirror and stuff. I'm trying to find it now for those turnips, but loved it. But that's a good idea. I have to use the pet. I never thought about doing the pesticide thing.
Because I mean, you do the pump with it, and that's what that plunger action is. Like, I mean, it's so it would just be like erky.
Maybe
but every time she's doing that, things are blowing up.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. When I get the model, because I'll obviously get it eventually, then I'd have to do that. Yeah, but that's the thing. I have like 2 of every character.
So I guess I still have to get a few more characters. I really want to get a Biophagus, mostly because I think that model looks really cool. It doesn't quite hit the same buttons for me as the female Magus and the Kellermorph, like we discussed, but let's say it's a good 3rd place for me. It's a good third place.
It's my favorite of the characters because it's my best painted character, because I didn't paint it. So it's absolutely. I've wanted it to be competitive so bad. So even if it's even if it's not that good, then I'll probably still take it most of the time just because it's so pretty. Not gonna lie. Binders don't come with bases. Sorry.
No, they do not. Which is why I would basically look at it from the top down, and I would draw a square around it and know that that is the amount of physical space that I am working with for the sculpt. And then also, I mean, like height and so on.
Yeah. I think the people suggesting like the Morlock and stuff, that does make sense. I actually, one of the things I loved is I like the idea of like the single Tyrannid, like auxiliary detachment in the GSC army for fun games, like the play on tabletop. They did a game ages ago now, and he had a Carnifex, or I think he actually took Old One Eye or something.
It's Old One Eye with the chains.
Yeah, that was so cool.
It was a great idea.
I loved that so much. So I like the idea of doing stuff like that. But yeah, you could use them all.
I'm actually going to be on Play on Tabletop later this year. It was originally going to be like a week from today. I was going to be in Canada, but with the kind of this rise of the Omicron variant, which sounds like a great movie title, we had to push it back. So I'll be going in late spring is when I'm going to shoot film for them. And I'm actually going to be painting a Tyrannid's army for Tycho from Play on Tabletop. That is a project that is on its way to me right now. So it's kind of crazy that a YouTube channel that got me into 40K, because I always thought it was way too complicated. I was never going to understand it. Their How to Play 9th edition, I was like, oh my God, I think I understand this.
I hope Games Workshop are grateful for channels like Play on Tabletop, because that's kind of the aim of my channel, I would say, is to take away the confusion that the factions have. So I break down rules quite simply, and I explain factions quite simply. But there are so many people that get into the hob that don't bother playing the game because it's too complicated, and then they watch people like Play on Tabletop and they go like, okay, I can do this. So yeah, I hope they are very grateful for what they do for the hobby just generally.
Oh, they are. They're well aware of it. Everyone on their Patreon is constantly blowing them up with like, "Hey guys, I'm a Patreon now because like your videos got me to this, so on and so on and so on." And I'm one of those people.
I meant Games Workshop.
Oh, Games Workshop. Oh, yeah. Games Workshop should definitely.
they bring. I think people like Play On bring them a lot of money.
Well, Play On, Tabletop
no
Tactics, Tabletop Titans, Winters,
absolutely.
Liam.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so many people just like you see people comment all the time on those things. Like, I don't actually play the game, but I love watching you guys play. So
you live play vicariously. That's what I'm actually now. I'm trying to be that guy for my my friend groups. I'm like, hey guys, if you've ever been even remotely interested in Warhammer, look at all these cool models. And guess what? You don't have to buy any of them. I already have them all. And so it's like your barrier for entry is now 0. And if they play with my Space Marines, or if they play with my Genestealers, and they're like, oh, I like these, I'm like, you can buy your own.
No, I said the same thing in my group, because obviously I'm like a lot of Genestealer players. I feel like I'm always on a quest to get more people to play the faction, because I want the range to be bigger. I want more models. I want like a crazy flyer, and I want a bunch of. I want a third wave basically of Genestealer cults, and that won't happen unless, of course, the faction, it's popular, and Games Workshop, deem that they'll make enough money, I guess, right? So I constantly saying, and I said to my group, I was like, look, if anybody has any interest in the faction and you ever want to borrow the army and just try it, I live right next to a game store in London, very popular, Bad Moon Cafe, and so I was like, if anybody ever wants to play with the army, let me know, and I'll happily lend it to you, because I want more people to get into it, right?
I hear so many great things about Bad Moon Cafe. One day I want to return to England, and I want to go to London, and I want to go to Bad Moon Cafe and just kind of like figuratively kick in the door and just be like, where's Quipster?
Yeah.
Where's Sandman? Where's Reza? And I'm just gonna find you guys, and you're gonna be like, oh god, he's here. But I'll of course walk in with all my models. But the
it's Gary Place.
But the this hobby is such an incredible thing for me. I got into it like a lot of people because of COVID, work, everything was super stressful, and then I found an artistic hobby that had a game related to it, that I got to be creative and think of it like kind of like chess and all this other great stuff. Now I've got my dad playing. I painted an entire Dark Angels army for him as a Christmas present. This hobby's awesome, and I get to like in such a short amount of time, I've now gotten to meet and interact with so many cool people like yourself, the folks at Play On, all these amazing people here in chat. So
through Quipster, I get to meet a lot of people like through YouTube and stuff, which has been so cool, and people like yourself, right? So it's just I love that. It's crazy, because I'm a weirdo in that, like, I don't really know many celebrities and stuff. Like, that's not my thing. However, there are a lot of like big Warhammer YouTubers that if I met, I would my heart would skip a beat. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about getting starstruck once I meet the Play On folks. They'll be like, okay, guys, now we're gonna shoot the video in 3, 2, 1, and I'm just
like, I met Winters, and he was like, you gotta remember, I am just a person, and I was like, but you're not, you're Winters.
He's got the hat and everything.
Yeah, exactly. So
that is so I'll tell you this now, and I know I've mentioned it to Quipster, not this year because I'm not big enough yet, but next year I'm getting my army painting game even to an even higher degree, and I am going to apply for the No Retreat Legends, because I do charity stuff all the time. The fact that SN Battle Reports does the tournament, money for charity, like, this is everything I want, and the people participating are my hobby heroes. Like, all my hobby heroes are in this, and to make it a goal to apply for and then be invited to go to Gibraltar and be part of that tournament is now my, like, people can have their golden demons, they can have their demon slayer swords, fine. I'm going to No Retreat Legends.
I can totally. It's I have never been more jealous ever when Quipster went to No Retreat Legends. It's the dream, of course it is. So the hype around it this year was pretty high, and I suspect it will only grow. So can't wait I'll always watch.
and you and I now must go with our Genestealers, and we can be the Genestealer Cult Cowboys.
Yeah.
And
maybe.
And I just realized, yes, we do need a flyer, because I need my my Thopters from Dune. I need my Dragonfly Thopters, and you need a crop duster.
That would be cool.
Get a little
cool.
biplane, just
I love it. Yeah.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been my guest, the wonderful Sandman. Can we please get a ! Sandman in the chat, please? And also, buddy, if I have missed anything of yours as far as projects or any sort of social medias that people can get a hold of you on, the Sandman link or the Sandman command will get you a link to his Instagram. It'll get you a link to his YouTube channel. It'll also get you a link to the Spotify or the Spotify link to the Conclave podcast. Is there anything else that people should be aware of that you are doing? Anything cool that you got coming up? Little hints of future YouTube videos that you might sprinkle some hintery-doos upon the people?
I don't know how exciting what I do is really. Well, yeah, like I say, my aim is basically, my channel is pretty much aimed at like mid to lower kind of experienced players, and it's kind of, the aim is to break things down, make things simple. So what are the factions that are currently doing well and why? You know, how rules, interactions, how they work, you know, tactics, how to use them. And yeah, I do a series called the Gotcha Guide, which is basically, the idea of the Gotcha Guide is just to cover the rules you need to know if you don't play the faction. So that's kind of the sell of my channel. I don't know how exciting that is, but yeah, if that interests you at all, yeah, please do check it out. I would appreciate it.
Oh, don't undersell yourself, dude. It's exciting for me. Like the fight first, fight last video, start to finish, glued to the screen. Just, I get it now.
Yeah,
oh my god, yeah, I get it now.
That was one that was quite highly requested. I think that's probably the rule that I think confuses people the most in this edition. And it was kind of a double whammy. I was talking about this because, like, on the one hand, Games Workshop should have been clearer. They absolutely should have been clearer in how they wrote those rules. I don't know why they write them differently in each book. They absolutely shouldn't have done that. However, the reason it confused people was because for about a year and a half or so, the people were arguing that there were like 3 types of fight first, charging did something different, and like how fight last, and like this unit's got fight last, but this unit's got fight last, and it is eligible to fight, and it was like, Games Workshop just had to come in, but no, it's fight first, fight last. I promise you. And so it was kind of a double whammy because it was like Games Workshop obviously weren't clear enough, but at the same time, people kind of talked everyone into a confusion, and it got pretty crazy for a while there. So thankfully, the FAQ was cleared most things up.
And your video cleared it up for the rest of us who, like me, remembering to like go find an FAQ, go to Warhammer community. I'm getting better about it, but there's a lot of folks like myself that are much more casual that do want to play with updated rules. We want to know how the game is supposed to be played. YouTube is a great source for that information because you can just go to your subscription and be like, oh, Sandman put out a video. Oh, Sandman put out a video about this rule. Yeah. I need to understand. I didn't need to go dig through an FAQ and then spend the next 30 minutes analyzing it. Like, so what does this mean? Yeah. And you help people with that. So in addition to being like a awesome like member of the podcast, having like a really fun Instagram, and also your YouTube channel, like it's just all these things together really make you and one of the reasons why, as a GSC player specifically, I guess in this case, but you are, and I don't care how much you try to downplay it, I see you, and I think a lot of people do, as a very positive and helpful influence, especially for new players. And as a new player, it is greatly appreciated.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's obviously the aim. So yeah, please do check out the channel. Yeah, if there is anything I should say as well that anybody feels like they need explaining or whatever, then absolutely drop me a message and I'll try and get around to make a video on it.
Yeah, he responds to Instagram messages. That's why he's here right now.
Yeah.
So
I don't get as many as Quipster.
Oh God, I know I inundate that guy. I know I message him way too much, but I can't imagine.
Quipster, his phone pops off constantly. So yeah, he's got a lot of stuff on.
Yeah. But I think that is where we've already taken up 2 hours of your time. I cannot thank you enough for generously being willing to come on the show. Fun. Yeah, I'm glad you had a good time. Like it'll be fun to do maybe down the road a retrospective, be like, How are things looking for
Yeah.
Genestealers now?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you know, 2 weeks time. So why did Genestealer Cults win the LVO?
oh, that would be
we'll have that conversation. It's
that
like,
actually that might be a good like maybe even a shorter like direct to video episode of just a just you and me chatting about like how did Genestealer Cults do specifically in LVO. And like maybe some list analyzing, because I highly anticipate that we might see something similar to like the 3 Thopter list or the 5 Thopter list that you saw in AdMech. Just like there's going to be one unit, like you said, that's going to be run to death. It's all rock grinders filled with aberrants with drills, and it's or not aberrants, acolytes with drills, and it's just like it's all going insane. But yeah, until next time, folks. Thank you so much.